listening to Tipping Point Radio. I'm Craig Merriweather, and this is the Mastermind Show. The placebo effect is a fascinating phenomenon. The idea that we have the ability to heal ourselves or even make ourselves sick using the power of our thoughts alone is amazing. I'd like to read to you a story from Dr. Joe Dispenza's book, You Are the Placebo. It's about a man named Sam Lundy. Sam Lundy was a retired shoe salesman living outside of St. Louis in the early 1970s, and he began to have difficulty swallowing. He eventually went to see a doctor who discovered that Sam had metastatic esophageal cancer. In those days, that was considered incurable. No one had ever survived it. It was a death sentence, and Sam's doctor delivered the news in an appropriately somber tone. To give Sam as much time as possible, the doctor recommended surgery to remove the cancerous tissue of the esophagus and in the stomach where the cancer had spread. Trusting the doctor, Sam agreed and had the surgery. He came through it as well as could be expected, but things soon went from bad to worse. A scan of Sam's liver revealed still more bad news: extensive cancer throughout the liver's entire left lobe. The doctor told Sam that sadly, at best, he had only months to live. So Sam and his new wife, both in their 70s, arranged to move 300 miles to Nashville, where Sam's wife had family. Soon after the move to Tennessee, Sam was admitted to the hospital and assigned to internist Clifford Meador. The first time Dr. Meador walked into Sam's room, he found a small, unshaven man curled up underneath a mound of covers, looking nearly dead. Sam was gruff and uncommunicative, and the nurses explained that he'd been like that since his admission a few days before. While Sam had high blood glucose levels due to diabetes, the rest of his blood chemistry was fairly normal, except for slightly higher levels of liver enzymes, which was to be expected of someone with liver cancer. Further examination showed nothing more amiss, a blessing considering the patient's desperate condition. Under his new doctor's orders, Sam begrudgingly received physical therapy, a fortified liquid diet, and lots of nursing care and attention. After a few days, he grew a little stronger, and his grumpiness started to subside. The doctor asked Sam, "What do you want me to do for you?" And the dying man thought for a while. Sam said, "I'd like to live through Christmas so I can be with my wife and her family. They've been good to me. Just help me make it through Christmas. That's all I want." And the doctor told Sam that he would do his best. By the time Sam was discharged in late October, he was actually in much better shape than when he had arrived. The doctor was surprised but pleased by how well Sam was doing. The doctor saw his patient about once a month after that, and each time Sam looked good. But exactly 1 week after Christmas, on New Year's Day, Sam's wife brought him back to the hospital. The doctor was surprised to find that Sam again looked near death. All he could find was a mild fever and a small patch of pneumonia on Sam's chest x-ray, although the man didn't seem to be in any respiratory distress. All of Sam's blood tests looked good, and the cultures the doctor ordered for him came back negative for any other disease. The doctor prescribed antibiotics and put the patient on oxygen, hoping for the best. But within 24 hours, Sam Lundy was dead. As you might assume, this story is about a typical cancer diagnosis followed by an unfortunate death from a fatal disease, right? An amazing thing happened when the hospital performed Sam's autopsy. The man's liver, in fact, was not filled with cancer. He had only a very tiny nodule of cancer in its left lobe and another very small spot on his lung. The truth is, neither cancer was big enough to kill him. In fact, the area around his esophagus was totally free of the disease as well. The abnormal liver scan taken at the St. Louis hospital had apparently yielded a false positive result. Sam didn't die of esophageal cancer, nor did he die of liver cancer. He also didn't die of the mild case of pneumonia he had when he was readmitted to the hospital. He died quite simply because everybody in his immediate environment thought he was dying. His doctor in St. Louis thought Sam was dying, and then the doctor in Nashville thought Sam was dying as well. Sam's wife and family thought he was dying too, and most important, Sam himself thought he was dying. Is it possible that Sam died from thought alone? Is it possible that thought is that powerful? And that's a passage from Dr. Joe Dispenza's book, You Are the Placebo. Over the last 10 years, Dr. Dispenza has lectured in more than 24 different countries on 6 continents, educating people about the role and function of the human brain. He has taught thousands how to reprogram their thinking through scientifically proven neurophysiological principles. As a result, many individuals have learned to reach their specific goals and visions by eliminating self-destructive habits. His approach, taught by using very simple methods, creates a bridge between the true human potential and the latest scientific theories of neuroplasticity. Dr. Dispenza explains how thinking in new ways, as well as changing beliefs, can literally rewire one's brain. In his best-selling book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, How to Lose Your Mind and Create a New One, Dr. Dispenza explains that you are not doomed by your genes and hardwired to be a certain way for the rest of your life. A new science is emerging that empowers all human beings to create the reality they choose. In his research into spontaneous remissions, Dr. Dispenza has found similarities among people who have experienced so-called miraculous healings, showing that they have actually changed their minds, which then changed their health. Dr. Dispenza is also one of the teachers featured in the award-winning film, What the Bleep Do We Know? Now here's my interview with Dr. Joe Dispenza. Hello, Dr. Dispenza. Welcome to the show.
I'm happy to be with you, Craig.
Yeah. Well, for maybe 100 years, thousands and thousands of studies every year come out in medical journals and even in the newspapers and magazines and things, and they always have a control group, whether it's a new medication or a new process, a new method, a new technique. They have the medication they're studying, then they have a control group, a placebo, sugar pill or something. And every single study, people on the placebo get better. And it's amazing to me that there's you and maybe a handful of other people who are kind of saying, okay, yeah, the medication thing's a little bit interesting, but the fact that people are getting better when they're on the sugar pill is just fascinating and mind-blowing. Why aren't we looking at this? And your new book, You Are the Placebo, looks at this, and there's studies and science and the whole reasoning behind why this works. So let me just ask you, basically, we have the ability to heal ourselves from the inside.
Yeah, I think if you think about the model of the placebo, Craig, I mean, why is it that you can give someone a sugar pill or a saline injection or do some sham surgery or procedure, and a certain percentage of those people get better? And if you would think that it's some external substance that they're believing in, but it really is they're believing in the thought, the possibility of themselves actually getting better. And the placebo really is about being healed by thought alone. So if you understand the science and the physiology of how the placebo works, the next question that's a good question to ask is, can you teach people how to do it? Can you teach them how to move into new states of being and change from the inside and be able to produce the same physiological responses as if they took the drug or took the placebo? Because the person, for example, who's taking an antidepressant or who's taking a pill to reduce pain, they're producing the same chemistry in their body as if they took the pain reliever, as if they took the antidepressant. So the body begins to make its own pharmacy of chemicals to match the exact chemical that they were taking. That's if people really begin to understand this, then they start to realize maybe that they don't really need too many things outside of them to change their inner states.
Well, it basically comes down to, maybe you could kind of explain the science, I'm sure this is a semester course at university, but maybe a little bit of the science behind what's happening in our bodies. Because basically, and there's a little bit from your book, it says here, the majority of genes, estimated range from 75 to 80% or 85%, are turned off and on by signals from our environment, including the environment of thoughts, beliefs, and emotions that we are cultivating in our brains. So it seems like with our minds, what we're doing when we have these placebo effects, when we're or miracle healings or faith healings, that we're literally turning our genes on and off with our thoughts, our faith, our emotions. Is that correct?
Yeah, so think about this. You think about 60 to 70,000 thoughts in one day. Out of those 60 to 70,000 thoughts you think in one day, 90% of those thoughts are the same thoughts as the day before. So the same thoughts will always lead to the same choices. The same choices will always create the same behaviors. The same behaviors will produce the same experiences, and the same experiences will create the same emotions. And those same emotions will drive the very same thoughts. And it's called an identity or a personality. And your biology, your neurocircuitry, your chemistry, your hormonal expression, and even the genes that you express are equal to how you think, how you act, and how you feel. So if you keep doing the same things every single day, there's no new information coming from the environment to begin to signal any new gene in any new way. Change it with a new thought, a new choice, a new behavior, a new experience, or a new emotion, and there are physical and chemical changes that will begin to take place in the brain and in the body as well as in the genes. So when we talk about the placebo response and people heal themselves of arthritic changes in their knee, or they heal themselves of heart conditions, or they heal themselves of asthma, or whatever the pain, uh, it's an important thing for people to understand that they can't consciously do that. In other words, they can't consciously make their cartilage grow back in their knee. They can't elevate their dopamine levels 200 times like they did when they took a placebo. So then what happens is that a person is marrying a thought, a new possible reality, a thought, an image that they could be better, and they're marrying it with an elevated emotion of inspiration, of gratitude, of joy, of possibility. And when you combine a clear intention with an elevated emotion, you move into a new state of being. And that's what begins to program the autonomic nervous system to begin to make those chemicals to match your very intention.
Well, what I find fascinating about this whole subject, and what I love about your book, is you have example after example and study after study of this actually working in people's lives. But the one that really blew my mind, I think we've all heard stories of people recovering from cancer, or maybe even their miraculous tumors disappearing. But there was a study of some elderly gentlemen, and forgive me if I'm getting some of the details wrong, but some elderly gentlemen, they went on this 5-day retreat up into the mountains or something, and they went to this small town, and they dressed, the people who were in this study, this retreat, dressed the town as if it was 20, 30 years ago, and they did all the things that these gentlemen would have done 20, 30, 40 years ago. And by the end of the week, these guys had physically become younger, not only in their heads, but in their bodies, measurably younger in their bodies.
Yeah, it's a great study by Ellen Langer, a Harvard researcher. And I love the study because what they told the men is to pretend that they were 22 years younger. And they set up the environmental conditions to remind them of what it would be like to see Marilyn Monroe or Mickey Mantle or the Kennedys, or listen to certain music and see certain dress codes. And it helped them to remind them of how they were 22 years ago. And then they were to pretend for the entire time during the retreat that they were actually 22 years younger. They did physiological markers on them before. They measured their finger lengths, their toe lengths. They measured their cognition, their range of motion, their height, their weight. They measured their eyesight. They measured all these things. And that just in 5 days, they had physical changes in their body. They were epigenetically signaling new genes in new ways by moving into a different state of being. So it begs the question, who are you pretending to be? Or better yet, who are you pretending not to be? And so by teaching people simple formulas and being able to do this in workshops and seminars around the world, we're beginning to measure some significant changes, just like those men that were part of the study.
Well, it goes in reverse, and it sort of ties into the story I told about Sam Lundy, the guy who died of cancer, who didn't really have any cancer in his system. If you can think positively about yourself and your health and get better, it would have to go the other way. If you think negatively about your health and yourself and your body, that you're going to get sick, you're going to stay sick, and my God, you might even kill yourself by thought alone. That's got to be possible, just like the Sam Lundy story.
Well, Sam's a great example. I start the book off with that because I want people to realize how powerful thought is. And if everybody around you thinks you're dying, and everybody around you thinks you have a disease, and they're treating you like that, like you have the disease, and you believe you have the disease, and you took the voodoo curse because you accepted, believed, and surrendered without analysis to your diagnosis and all of the symptoms that are correlated with it, and you signed on the dotted line for a certain procedure, and you didn't think you could get better without that procedure, it's the same exact thing. But instead of in Sam's case, he ultimately died by thought alone. People get sick by thought alone as well.
Okay, so this begs the question: what do we do? If I got a stressful job, I have teenagers in the house who are rolling their eyes at me at everything I say. I'm frustrated. I'm disappointed. What do I do? I see that down the road I am going to get sick, just like my parents did. I've even set myself up with a lot of cues from my family because there's lots of diabetes in my family or cancer or what have you. What can I do to change this around? It's obvious people can use their minds to get better. How do I do that?
Well, I mean, knowledge is the precursor to experience. I mean, the more knowledge you have, the more prepared you are for an experience. This is a time in history, Craig, where people don't only want to know, but they want to know how. So the more you understand and the more you learn the way things really are, and the more you question the way things really are, and the more you decide what's valuable and important to you, and the more you become conscious of your unconscious thoughts, your unconscious habits and emotions that have become so familiar to you, and then get out of your resting state and begin to really change your own state of being and begin to experiment with it. So, if you understand that emotional intelligence is shortening the refractory period of your emotional reactions to your teenagers, you may not be able to control everything in your external environment, but you can certainly practice controlling your inner states. If you know that thoughts have something to do with your destiny and that your personality creates your personal reality, you may wake up every morning a little earlier and decide who you want to be when you open your eyes and create something in your future and see if it actually shows up. If you have an illness or a sickness and you're living by anger or fear every single day, maybe it's that emotion that's got you in trouble in the first place. And maybe you work on becoming conscious of the things in your life that make you go unconscious emotionally, and then decide to condition your body to a new state of mind. Begin to create more elevated emotions and signal new genes in new ways. To experiment with these concepts means you become the scientist with your own body. You become your own genetic engineer.
Okay, you just said wake up and decide who I want to be. You know, look, I'm of a certain age. I'm going to turn 47 this summer. You know, I've had a life long experiences. Here's where I live. Here's the job I do. Here's the family I have. Here's the genetic precursors I have to these diseases. How is it possible that I get to decide who I want to be?
Well, it begs the question, is your personality creating your personal reality, or is your personal reality creating your personality? Is your environment controlling how you think and feel, or is how you think and feel controlling your environment? If you ascribe to the idea that you're a victim to your environment, then that's the belief you have to change. If you understand that you're at cause in your life and you truly take that on and you commit to that idea completely, 100%, then you would begin to look at how you can begin to start making small but measurable changes for yourself. Because the belief that you're a certain age, or the belief that you have genes that control your destiny, or the belief that it's too late, whatever belief that is a thought that you've thought enough times that it's now hardwired in your brain. So that's the exact thing, that's the exact structure of why we wrote the book. I wrote the book because I wanted people to question their beliefs about themselves and their lives and begin to change that belief. And a belief is a thought you keep thinking over and over again because you've experienced something neurologically and emotionally or chemically to such a degree that it's become part of your biology. So in order to change a belief or a perception about yourself and your life, you have to make a decision with such firm intention that the amplitude of that decision carries a level of energy that's greater than the hardwired programs in your brain and the emotional addictions in your body. And your body has to respond to your mind. In other words, the choice you make becomes an experience that you never forget. To come out of your resting state and give your body an energetic lift because you are making a decision about who you want to be is enough to begin to rewrite the program in a matter of seconds. Now, most people will say, well, I don't feel like it. And I would say, well, then that emotion is the emotion that you're addicted to.
Okay, but it seems like we're up against a huge fight against a body that has been conditioned and trained for decades and decades to feel a certain way, and therefore creating thoughts of a certain way. If you feel terrible, you're going to probably not be the happiest person in the world. And if you're not the happiest person in the world, you're not going to feel that great. And so you have this conditioning, you have this training, sort of kind of like that wax on, wax off from the Karate Kid. You do it over and over again, it's just going to become natural. How do you get rid of that?
Well, that's what the book is about. It's not something that you're able to do, It's not something as a panacea that takes one attempt. You have to stay at it, and in order to move into the concept of change, you have to step into the river of change, we call it. In other words, the moment you decide to change, you're not going to feel like yourself. You're not going to think the same way. You're not going to make the same choices. That's the hardest part about change, not making the same choice. You're not going to demonstrate the same behaviors. You're going to inhibit certain experiences that create certain emotional payoffs, and you're going to feel a little bit uncomfortable. That moment that you feel uncomfortable is now the moment you just stepped into that river of change. This is the moment now where most people rush back and make the same choice or demonstrate the same behavior or recreate the same experience for the same emotion, and they say, this feels right. Well, no, that feels familiar. Crossing that river of change is the biological, the neurological, the chemical, and even the genetic death of the old self. And when we begin to understand that that place, that unknown, that void, that place of uncertainty is the perfect place to create from, that's the moment all of a sudden we can begin to say, okay, I'm in the unknown now, and now I can't create from the known, but I'm in this place of uncertainty, and the best way to predict my future then is to create it in the unknown. We've seen so many people use that exact methodology with conditions that medical science told them they had no solution for, or they had a rough childhood, or whatever it was, and they have a whole new life now. So we know it's possible. The hardest part about all of this is making the time to do it.
Well, I want to let's touch on that right now. The book is "You Are the Placebo." You can ask for it at your local bookstore. You can get it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, other online booksellers. But you also, Dr. Dispenza, do workshops in the United States around the world, Australia, Europe, Mexico. And at these workshops, you literally help teach people how to create this new level of mind, I guess you would say.
Yeah, I mean, the best way to do this is to retreat from your life, to remove the constant stimulation from your external environment that reminds you of who you think you are. And if you can get people to dissociate from the people they know and the places they go and the things they do at the exact same time, and teach them sound information, and then teach them how to apply that information, many of those people, if they're committed enough, will experience a personal transformation. That personal transformation is a physical change that should take place. So we teach the workshops because it's a way for people to have the firsthand practical experience of how to do it. And in our workshops, we cover a lot of territory. And covering that territory is just a great way for people to realize that you don't have to be a Buddhist monk to do this or have 40,000 hours of meditation or to be a scholar or a researcher. The common people around the world are doing the uncommon, and this is the time right now where people are getting it on such a deep level and they're being empowered by themselves.
Well, and what's fascinating about your workshops is it's just not, well, gosh, for lack of a better word, it's not a woo-woo workshop. This is a lot of science goes into this, and you are bringing in scientists and researchers to hook people up to brain scanners and to heart monitors, and you're doing this as a huge research project to show in the scientific literature and in the medical literature that this stuff is for real. And there's people walking around with a brain monitor, and heart monitors on, and they're literally showing that by doing this work and doing this process, doing these techniques, that they are changing the way their brain looks.
It's not just in their mind, Craig, it's in their brain now. And we've brought in a team of researchers, neuroscientists, physicists, and academics to study our students because I want people to realize how powerful they are, and I want them to know when they're in the proper state and when they're not. And when they can create that distinction, and we, by the way, made scientific history this last year in some of the measurements that we made because some of the changes that people were making were significantly off the chart. And when you see these scans of people, you see the research, you're more likely to believe that it's possible for you. And the placebo is based on belief. So we want to close that gap between knowledge and experience, between information and transformation. And the way you do that is you measure it.
Well, I want to ask you about a quote. Well, it's not so much a quote, but you talk about Dr. Bernie Siegel in your book, and he was studying a lot of cancer survivors and working with cancer patients. And Dr. Siegel said something that was actually I found rather frightening, and maybe you can discuss it. He said there are no incurable diseases, only incurable patients.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, I read that, and my evil brain starts going, well, maybe I'm one of those incurable patients. Uh, is it possible that there are people out there who just won't be able to do this kind of work?
Well, I mean, we ultimately all run into the end. We all ultimately die. There's no doubt about that. And I'm saying is that there are ways to turn conditions around once you understand the biology behind how the condition was created and the possible technique or mechanism to be able to change it. That we want to be able to create a field of information and develop a skill on how to do it so that people really begin to make really significant changes for themselves. And sure, I mean, at some level, we all are responsible for managing our inner and outer world. And there are times in our life where we get caught up in our own stress levels and in our own emotions and our own limitations and our own sabotaging behaviors. But the key is that you're not defined by that. The key is that if you can change that state, there should be biological changes that accompany it. And so people who don't want to change, people who don't really want to make the effort, well, then they have to rely on things outside of them.
Well, I want to turn the subject a little bit and talk about working with other people. There's in prepping for this interview, there's a story I found about a woman, his family. They had a little baby who had food allergies, seemed to be allergic to just about everything. And using this process of yours, these meditations and these ways of changing your thinking, the baby ended up not having food allergies anymore and pretty much eat everything. I know you work with Greg Braden, and you have, in fact, there's a DVD of a workshop you two did together on your website, drjoedispenza.com. And Greg Dispenza, for a long time, was showing this video of a medicineless hospital in China where this woman with an inoperable tumor, a cancerous tumor, I believe in her pancreas, uh, went to this medicine hospital, and these doctors, these energy healers, I guess you would say, stood over her and thought a future potential that this woman was healed. And on the scanning machine, the MRI machine, you could just watch the tumor disappear. So is it possible, these two examples would seem to say yes, but is it possible to use this work and apply it to other people? Can I heal somebody else?
Yeah, in our advanced workshops, I mean, if you believe in the quantum model and it's all energy and information, if you're able to do that properly, well, we've seen it enough times. Primarily, we've seen it a lot with a lot of immune-mediated conditions. The example in the hospital in China is that those physicians were saying that it was done, that it was done. They were holding the intention that it was done, that the tumor was healed, and they were actually given thanks as if it was done. And it was that kind of intention that began to change matter. And so seeing that, just seeing it, should help you to understand that it's possible. And the more you accept that it's possible, the better it works.
Well, is this when you're beginning this process and learning about it, is it necessary to trick yourself into this way of thinking?
No, we don't believe in fake it till you make it. When you think about eating a really good meal and you start fantasizing about the food, your body starts to your mouth starts to salivate, your digestive juices start to come on, and your body physiologically is responding to your mind. It's living in that future reality. So we're not of the we're not of the mindset about fake it till you make it. We're really teaching people the empirical way to do it. In the same way they've done it in other things in their life, we're asking them to make it a skill. We already know how to do this. You just have to be able to be willing to do it repeatedly.
So it's basically taking some time every day to reprogram your thoughts, your attitudes, and beliefs, so that you create this life of healing and of being this different person. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
And this, how long do I take to do this?
It doesn't matter. Some people are able to do it in a short amount of time. Other people, it takes a year. But every person that reaches that other side of the river is happy that they stuck with it.
Yeah. Well, it's just like, going to the gym. It's this, it's something that just because you went to the gym 3 times doesn't mean that your life is better forever. It's something you have to do every day and work with it. So, everybody, the book is You Are the Placebo. Again, find it online. You find it at your local bookstores. You can also go to drjoedispenza.com and find out where his workshops are going to be happening. Find out more about and he has all this extra tools to help you with this process. It's not just a book. There's meditation CDs and various things to help you get started with all this. Highly recommend you go to one of the workshops, so if it's at all possible. And Dr. Joe, I so appreciate you being here. Also, everybody, if you're on the Tipping Point Radio, of course, Facebook, website, Twitter, all those things are right there on tippingpointradio.com/Joe. And Dr. Dispenza, I so appreciate you being here and the work you're doing. You're one of the few out there shouting from the mountaintop about this. So I so appreciate it.
Thank you, Craig, and I appreciate everything that you're doing also.